Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're diving into Florida's darkest secrets, real stories that chill the bone. From haunted piers to disappearing hitchhikers and swamps that watch in silence, these tales aren't just legends, they're true. Houses that bleed, whispers that reveal your darkest fears, and creatures lurking just out of sight. These stories will make you question what's real and what's waiting in the shadows. So, dim the lights, listen closely, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones you can't see. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started and the horror is waiting to unfold. Now let's dive into the darkness. They say the forest breathes different in the dark, not just in poetry or whispers passed between old rangers over burnt coffee, but in the realest, most physical way, like lungs moving under dirt and moss, like something alive and ancient exhaling between the trees. The Ocala National Forest is no fairy tale patch of woods. It's old, wet, ugly with secrets. And out in the swampy parts, where the air feels heavier than it should, something waits. People talk about the silence. That's the first thing hikers notice. Once you're a mile or two in, far enough that the road noise disappears and the air shifts, you notice it. No birdsong, no rustling of branches, no frogs, no bugs. Just silence. Not peaceful silence. Pressed silence. Like the air is holding its breath. Then comes the screaming. Nobody agrees on what it sounds like. Some say it's a woman being torn in half. Some say it sounds like a kid crying underwater. Some say it starts soft, like a whistle, and then grows jagged and raw, like someone shoved metal in a blender. But they all agree on one thing. It doesn't echo. Sound in the forest always echoes. Coyote howls bounce around the canopy like marbles in a jar. But not this. The scream just hangs in the air, right in front of you, right behind you, sometimes even inside your own chest. And that's when you know you need to leave. Because if you stay too long, it follows you. Ask Tom Billings, ex-Marine, did 2 tours in Afghanistan. He went out in 2009 for a solo hike, wanted peace and solitude. He got back to the ranger station. 3 hours later, barefoot and bleeding, muttering about how it won't leave me alone. They said he ran nearly 5 miles through the forest, tore up his feet, scratched his face on branches, and just kept running. He never went back. Sold his camping gear, left Florida, and refused to talk about it for years. But in a drunken interview 5 years later, he finally spilled. The scream followed him, not just in the woods, even after. In parking lots, in dreams, in quiet rooms. He said it would sometimes whistle to him when he was alone, like it had learned his voice, but the most infamous case, the one nobody in Marion County talks about anymore, not unless they're drunk or dying, was in 2011. A young couple, Brandon Ellis and Alyssa Cardell, 22, fresh out of college, thought it'd be fun to spend 3 nights off-grid in Ocala. They bought a cheap tent, borrowed a Jeep from Brandon's cousin, and told their friends it'd be a romantic getaway. The last anyone heard from them was a voicemail Alyssa left for her sister. "It's beautiful out here," she said. Kind of. Too quiet, though, like the trees are listening. And then there was static. When they didn't come home, authorities launched a small search party. A few rangers, some volunteers, and a guy named Daryl Henley led the charge. Daryl wasn't new. He'd been working these woods for over 20 years. Real solid guy. Real serious. Ex-military, kept to himself, always had a weathered notepad in his back pocket where he jotted things no one else ever saw. He found the campsite after about 2 days. The Jeep was untouched, still parked near Farrells Lake trailhead. But the site itself, it wasn't right. The tent had been torn to shreds, like something had grabbed it with long fingers and just ripped it apart like paper. No blood, no drag marks, no tracks. Just chaos. One fold-up chair, still upright, a pair of flip-flops side by side, and a little hand-cranked emergency radio sitting on a log, humming static. Darryl stared at it for a long time. Said it sounded wrong. The static wasn't just white noise, it had a rhythm to it, like a breath, like the radio was breathing. He turned it off but swore he heard a whisper right before it went silent. They searched the woods for 3 more days. No signs of Brandon or Alyssa. No torn clothing, no bones, no scraps. It was like they'd been swallowed. Darryl changed after that. He kept showing up to work, but something behind his eyes went hollow. He'd sit for hours staring at the tree line, not saying a word. Then, one night, he told his coworker, a guy named Rick Vance, that he was going back out there, alone. Said he needed to see something again. Rick tried to talk him out of it, told him the place had gotten under his skin. But Darryl just smiled this empty smile and said, "I'm not scared of trees. I'm scared of what remembers." He went out that night, just before midnight. Didn't take much with him. A flashlight, his notebook, and a whistle. Said it was for if he got lost. He came back 2 days later. Pale, dirt under his nails, beard grown out, patches of it gray now. Looked like he hadn't slept at all. Refused to talk to anyone. Wouldn't write anything down, wouldn't return calls. And then one morning, he was gone. Left his truck at the ranger station, notebook sitting on the seat. Inside it, only one entry. Don't ever whistle back. It remembers. Nobody's seen him since. His family thinks he had a breakdown and just wandered off into the woods. But Rick swears he heard something weird on the security camera the night Darryl vanished. A whistle. Low, soft, echoless, coming from the woods. Every now and then, new campers disappear. Not every year, but enough. Sometimes it's a solo hiker, sometimes a couple. Sometimes they find the gear, torn up, never burned, just shredded. Other times, there's nothing at all. No footprints, no phone pings, just silence. But the scariest part isn't the disappearances, it's the ones who come back. There was a girl in 2017, 16 years old, ran away from home and hid out in the woods. When they found her 3 days later, she was curled up in a dry riverbed muttering, "It has a mouth but no face. It learns. It copies." She never spoke again, and in 2020 a guy live-streamed his solo camping trip to YouTube. Thousands watched. It started normal. Him setting up his tent, showing off his gear. But around 1:17 a.m. he stepped out of frame to relieve himself, and the camera picked up a strange, drawn-out screech. People in the comments thought it was staged, thought he edited it in, until he didn't come back. The stream ran for 4 more hours. No one ever saw him again. Police found the campsite 2 days later. The only thing left was the camera. Still recording. The final image was just trees and the sound of breathing. They say if you go out there now, and the wind dies and the swamp goes still, you might hear it. Not a scream, not at first, just a whistle. Almost playful, almost human. Don't whistle back. It remembers. It always does. Venice Beach, California. By day, it's all sunburnt tourists and rollerbladers in neon shorts, street performers juggling fire, vendors selling crystal bracelets and questionable edibles. But by night, especially late, past midnight when the last drunk has stumbled home and the fog rolls in from the Pacific like an old ghost, it changes. Ask any old fisherman, not the ones who pose with Instagram filters and shiny new rods, the real ones, the ones with weathered faces, tobacco-stained fingers, and gear that smells like salt, fish, and gasoline. They'll tell you not to fish alone on the Venice Pier after midnight, not because of crime or cops or even the tides, but because of the boy. They never shout his story. It's always shared in hushed tones, eyes darting toward the edge of the pier like maybe he's listening, like maybe he's always listening. It starts with a sound, not waves, not gulls, something softer, wet, dripping, like someone wringing out a towel, but there's no one around, no puddles, just that sound, then silence, and then, if you're really unlucky, the knock. 3 knocks, always 3, soft, slow, deliberate, coming from directly beneath where you're standing. Not a creak, not a splinter, a knock, like bone tapping against soaked wood. The smart ones walk away when they hear it. The older guys pretend not to notice. But sometimes, every few years, someone knocks back, like Miguel Vargas in 2016. 32, big guy, loved talking trash. He and his buddy, Rich, had a tradition, night fishing off the pier once a month. Usually drank a 6-pack, told dirty jokes, and argued about the Dodgers. That night it was foggy, thicker than usual. Miguel said it made the pier feel like it was floating in nothing. They were fishing off the west side, near the middle. Just them, the dark ocean, and the distant red glow of a lifeguard tower. Then Miguel heard it. Knock, 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 right under his boots. He thought it was Rich messing with him. Stepped over, smacked his shoulder, but Rich swore up and down. It wasn't him. They stood still, waited, nothing. Then Miguel got that dumb grin of his, the one he always wore when he was about to do something reckless, and he knocked back. 1, 2, 3, and that's when it grabbed him. Rich said Miguel didn't even have time to scream. 1 second he was standing there. The next he was flat on his back, legs dragging toward the edge of the pier. His hands were flailing, fingers scraping wood. Rich lunged and caught him by the wrists just in time. Whatever had him had cold, wet fingers. He said they felt too small to be a man's hand, but too strong to be a kid's, and they were grinning at him. That's what stuck with Rich. That smile. He saw something pale just beneath the boards, in the cracks between the planks. A face, bloated, waterlogged, with skin like wax, and a grin too wide for its face, like the muscles were pulled back by invisible hooks. Miguel screamed, kicked, thrashed. Finally, whatever it was let go. Left his ankle red and raw like it had been clutched by ice. They ran. Left their rods, their cooler, everything. Didn't come back for days. Miguel never fished. Again. Wouldn't even go near the beach. Said he still hears dripping water in his dreams. Said he can feel it sometimes. Watching. Waiting. The locals say it's the ghost of a boy named Thomas Fields, 10 years old. Fell through the boards one summer. Night in 1983. Back when the pier was still being rebuilt after storm damage. The city had left gaps in the wood, lazy repairs, no safety rails, and Thomas, chasing his older brother after dark, stepped on the wrong plank. He went straight down, screamed once. His body was never found. Divers searched, Coast Guard patrolled, but nothing, not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not even bubbles. The ocean swallowed him whole. The news ran a short story. The city blamed the currents. His mother never stopped showing up every Sunday morning to stare at the water until she passed away 10 years later. Some say it started after that. Late-night fishermen began reporting strange noises, the sound of dripping water, sometimes from dry spots, sometimes right behind them. They'd look down and see little wet footprints on the pier, like a barefoot child had walked by. One guy said he followed them all the way to the end, and they just stopped. No splash, no sign of someone jumping, just gone. A woman walking her dog past the pier in 1997 swore she saw a boy standing halfway down the railing. He wasn't moving, just staring out at the water. She called out to him. No response. She took a step closer, and the boy turned. No eyes. Just black, wet holes where they should have been, and a mouth that smiled too big. The dog refused to go near the pier after that. Whined and howled if she even tried. The city claims it's all just urban legend. but they quietly installed motion-activated cameras under the pier in 2018, after a teenager on TikTok posted a video of the Venice knock going viral. Thousands of views. You could hear it in the video. Clear as day. 3 knocks. Then the boy filming says, "Ha ha ha, I'm gonna knock back." The video cuts there. No ending. His parents pulled it offline the next day. The kid was hospitalized. Shock, hypothermia, a broken wrist. Found on the sand under the pier. Unconscious and freezing. His friends said he was just standing there, staring into the dark, then suddenly gone, like yanked by an invisible rope. Since then, no one knocks back. Not the locals, at least. Every few months, someone new tries. A tourist, a skeptic, some edgy ghost-hunting influencer. They come with cameras and big smiles. Most of the time, nothing happens. They get spooked and laugh it off. But every now and then, someone goes quiet. No scream, no splash, just 3 knocks and a grin in the shadows. They say if you're ever out there alone, really alone, with the fog thick around you, and you hear dripping water where there shouldn't be any, don't move, don't speak, and for the love of God, don't knock back, because the boy beneath the Venice pier remembers who does, and one day he might want you to come join him. Cassadaga isn't like other towns in Florida. It breathes different. The trees hang lower, the fog clings longer, and the air always smells faintly of burnt sage. It's a place built on whispers and seances, where folks believe the dead never left. They just settled into the silence between heartbeats. And at the edge of that silence sits the old Whitmore house, a 2-story Victorian with peeling lilac paint and windows like black eyes. That's where the Devil's Mirror lives. It's not on display. Not anymore. The current owners, if there are owners left, keep the doors locked and the blinds drawn tight. But back in the late 70s, when the house was still used by spiritualists, people paid good money just to look into it. Not a museum piece, not a parlor trick. A mirror, yes, but not like the ones you know. This one was tall and narrow, framed in ebony wood carved with twisting vine patterns. The kind of mirror that seemed like it was always watching even when covered. Eliza May, a well-known psychic medium, was the first to make it famous, or infamous depending on who you ask. In the fall of 1979, she started offering mirror reflections at the Whitmore house. $10 got you 5 minutes alone in the seance room, just you and the mirror. She called it confronting the truth. Only a handful of people ever made it the full 5 minutes. They'd come out looking different, shaky, pale. Some threw up. A few refused to talk about what they saw. One man fainted. Another left town the next day and never came back. But Eliza? She just smiled wider every week. Said the mirror showed her things. Important things. She started writing in a red leather journal every night, stopped attending the town's spiritualist meetings, began drawing strange symbols in chalk on the wooden floors around the mirror. Then winter came, and Eliza May cut her wrists in front of the mirror on Christmas Eve. They found her sitting upright, smiling at her reflection with wide, glassy eyes. There was no note, just that same red leather journal, now soaked in her blood, sitting open. To a page with a single line scrawled over and over again, "She wears my skin now." After that, the mirror was boarded up, but it never went away. Over the years, the Whitmore house passed through the hands of owners and caretakers like a cursed heirloom. Some moved out within days, others simply vanished. No one lived there, longer than a year. The neighbors started calling it the dead house. Kids dared each other to run up to the porch at night, but few ever did. Those who did never stayed long. Then in 2003, a group of teenagers broke in. You know how these stories go. Small town, bored kids, legends that feel more like dares than warnings. One of the teens, a kid named Mason Terrell, dared the others to stare into the mirror for 10 minutes. He claimed he could handle it, that it was just an old ghost story. He was wrong. The others say he went quiet about 5 minutes in, just stood there, motionless, lips moving like he was praying. Then the screaming started. He clawed at his face, tore his nails down his cheeks until blood soaked his shirt, started ranting about teeth in the walls and bones behind the glass. His friends dragged him out of the house, but he kept thrashing, kept screaming. He hasn't spoken since. Won't open his eyes, not even under sedation. His parents had to nail shut every closet door in their home because he kept trying to crawl into them, whispering, "She's in there. She's waiting. She's got my face now." They moved out of Cassadaga last year. Took Mason with them, though God knows what's left of him. Some say the mirror feeds on reflection, not the physical kind, but the kind that lives in your soul. That it doesn't show your true self, but the version of you you're most afraid of becoming. And if you look long enough, that version finds its way out and takes your place. No one's broken into the Whitmore house since. Sometimes, though, late at night, if you stand near the gates and the moon is just right, you can hear faint laughter behind the boarded windows, a soft, high giggle, like a woman amused by something only she understands. And if you're brave, or stupid, enough to knock on that door, don't wait to see if it opens, because some mirrors don't show reflections. They show replacements, and the devil's mirror never forgets a face it likes. There's a stretch of highway in southern Florida that even the locals don't like to talk about. Oh, they know it's there, everyone does. They drive it, some even daily. But they don't linger. They don't pull over. They don't stop, unless it's a dire emergency. And even then they'll keep the engine running and their eyes on the rearview mirror. It's I-75, known better to truckers and drifters as Alligator Alley. A lonely, straight shot that cuts through the heart of the Everglades. At first glance, it seems like any other long road through swamp country. 2 lanes running parallel to stagnant water and endless sawgrass, with cypress trees bending in the wind like tired old men. You see the occasional gator sunning itself. On the side of the road, maybe a turtle or two, a few buzzards that look like they're waiting for something to die. But if you drive it at night, alone, something feels wrong. Not jump scare, horror movie wrong. Deeper, primal, like something ancient is watching you from the tree line. Something that was never supposed to be seen. Ask any veteran trucker. They'll tell you, Alligator Alley breathes, not the way people breathe. Not rhythmically, not gently, but with long, hungry exhalations. Like the road is asleep and dreaming of meat, and if you're unlucky, it remembers you're there. Ricky Maris found that out the hard way. Ricky had driven long hauls for over 20 years. He was a calm man, practical, not prone to tall tales. He'd served in the army, done 2 tours overseas, had seen some ugly things, but nothing that ever made his voice shake, not until Florida. It was early spring of 2004. Ricky had a shipment of electrical conduit going from Tampa to Miami. He left late, after sundown, thinking he could avoid the worst of the traffic and make it before dawn. He had no idea what was waiting for him. He was about 40 miles in when it started, just past the halfway point, deep in the swamp where cell reception drops, and the nearest town is 50 miles of sawgrass away. First, it was the silence, not a peaceful kind, like sitting in a cabin in the woods. This silence had weight, like the world had stopped breathing. No crickets, no frogs, not even the low drone of mosquitoes against the windshield. He rolled down his window to listen. Nothing. Dead quiet, and the air smelled off. Not like swamp rot, something sharper, like meat left too long in the sun. And it was cold, unnaturally cold. The kind of cold that didn't make sense in Florida at all. That's when he saw it. A movement, fast, just a flicker. Something large, pale, and crouched low darted across the edge of his high beams. He slammed the brakes, thinking it was a gator or maybe a bear, but it didn't move like either. It moved on 2 legs, kind of, but bent backward at the knees like a deer mid-collapse. And it was watching him. He didn't want to believe it at first, just a trick of the light. A hallucination. Highway fatigue, but then it stood up, 7 feet tall, maybe more. Lean, skin like wax stretched too tight over bones. No fur, no clothes, and its eyes. Jesus, its eyes glowed red. Not reflected like an animal in headlights. Lit. Alive. Like coals in a dying fire. It stared right at him. Then it stepped back into the trees and disappeared. Ricky threw the truck in gear and floored it, tires squealing on asphalt. The CB radio crackled to life without anyone pressing the button. "Still watching," a voice hissed. Then silence. He shut it off, heart pounding so hard he thought he might pass out. But the worst was yet to come. About 10 miles down the road, the engine died. No warning, no sputter. Just silence, like someone had ripped the key out of the ignition. The headlights flickered once, then went dark. Everything went dead. Dashboard, radio. Even his watch stopped ticking. He was alone, in the dark, in the middle of a 2-lane swamp road with no help for miles. Then came the scratching. It started at the back of the trailer, light at first, like fingernails on metal. Then it grew louder, sharper, intentional. 3 long scrapes like claws dragging down steel. The truck rocked slightly. Something was moving back there. He stayed frozen in the cab, too scared to breathe. His hand reached for the door lock but stopped halfway, because he saw it. The thing crawled past the passenger side window on all fours, but it wasn't walking. It moved like a spider, limbs jerking at impossible angles, neck twitching, head tilted almost upside down, those red eyes burning through the glass. It smiled, lips too thin, teeth too long, and it watched him, inches away. Then it vanished into the dark. The power came back 5 minutes later. The engine kicked on like nothing had happened. Ricky didn't wait. He tore down that road, pushing, the truck harder than it was built to go, until the first gas station lights broke through the trees like salvation. When he got out, shaking and sweating, he saw the claw marks, 3 deep grooves running from the back of the trailer to the cab. Clean, precise, like something wanted him to know it had been there, and could come back. He never drove that route again. His wife said he couldn't sleep for weeks, said he'd sit up all night with the lights on, listening. Sometimes in the quiet, he'd whisper to himself, "Engines don't scare it. Headlights don't blind it. It waits. It always waits." In the years since, other drivers have reported similar things. Engine failures in the same 10-mile stretch. Shapes in the trees. One man's rig was found empty, still idling, with claw marks on the inside of the windshield. Some say it's an urban legend. Swamp gas. Sleep deprivation. But those who've seen it, they don't forget. Their eyes go distant when they talk about it. Their voices crack. They say the thing is older than the road, older than Florida. Some tribal stories mention it. A skinless one that lives in the muck and takes the shape of men, but it's not a man. Never was. So if you ever find yourself on Alligator Alley past midnight and your engine sputters, don't get out. Don't stop. And for the love of God, don't look into the trees, because it's always watching, and it remembers your face. There's a house in Coral Gables that no one talks about out loud. Not anymore. It sits half swallowed by banyan roots and time, its terracotta roof shingles crumbling, its wrought iron gates jammed shut with rust and vines. You wouldn't even know it was there unless someone pointed it out, and even then you'd probably shrug and keep walking. But locals, real locals, the ones who've lived there for generations, don't point. They cross the street. They don't look up. Because of the girl in the window. They say she appears in the upper left window of the second story. Always that one. Always at dusk. She just stands there, a pale smudge behind the dirty glass, with long, tangled black hair that hangs like wet seaweed and a face so still it makes your heart stutter when you see it. Not angry, not sad, just watching. Sometimes she blinks. The house was built in 1927 by a Cuban banker named Mauricio del Prado. He made his fortune just before the crash, and after he died in his office, stabbed 16 times by a former client, his widow Isadora lived there alone. That's where the first stories began. Neighbors heard strange sounds late at night. Wailing, whispers, furniture dragging across floors when no one was home. And Isadora herself, once a fixture of Coral Gables. Society became reclusive. The garden grew wild, the lights stayed off, and she started boarding up the windows, except for one. That window. In 1952, the house was declared abandoned. Isadora hadn't been seen in months. When the police finally broke in, they found her in the attic, slumped in a rocking chair facing the mirror. Her body was already decomposing, but what unsettled the officers the most was the mirror itself, smeared with handprints. Dozens of them. Small, like a child's. Even though Isadora had no children, after that, no one would buy the house. Years passed. Trees grew thick. Coral Gables got busier, louder, more modern, but the house stayed there, stuck in time like a rotting tooth in a pretty smile. Then came 1998. A Miami developer, young and dumb and full of cash, bought the property in a bundled deal. He figured he'd flip it, turn it into a wedding venue or a bed and breakfast. He sent in a crew of 5 to start demo work. The team was local, experienced. They weren't superstitious, not at first. The first day, 2 of them swore they heard footsteps upstairs, even though the second floor was sealed off. On day 2, the electrician walked off the job. Wouldn't say why, just packed his gear and left. On day 4, the site manager, Hector, fell from the second floor and broke his wrist, claimed someone pushed him. By day 6, the whole crew was gone. The developer laughed it off, said it was just contractor crap. He brought in cameras, tried to film a walkthrough for his investors. The video never uploaded, the laptop shorted out. He never tried again. And then Daniel Ortiz happened. Daniel was just a kid, 19 with more guts than sense. He'd heard about the girl in the window from friends and made the mistake of daring them one night. Said he'd break in, record the whole thing on his phone, and prove it was all just a dumb story. It was supposed to be a joke, a ghost hunt, a quick thrill. He went in around midnight, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. He didn't come out. The police found him just before dawn. He was sitting cross-legged on the front lawn, soaked in blood. His mouth had been sewn shut, not with thread, but with wire. Thin, rusty wire that had been wrapped through his lips in tight, jagged X's. His nails were ripped clean off, both hands. His eyes were so bloodshot it looked like they'd been crying blood for hours. The wire had to be cut out, piece by piece. Even after the stitches, Daniel didn't speak for a full month. When he finally did, it wasn't what anyone expected. He didn't talk about pain, he didn't talk about what he saw. All he said was, "She's not trapped, you are." Then he laughed. They had to sedate him. He's still institutionalized in a facility upstate. Refuses to be near windows, paints the same thing over and over, a pale girl with black hair, peering out from behind the glass. Sometimes, in the reflection, you can see others, faces stretched in silent screams, as if they're trapped behind her, beneath her, inside her. The house was boarded up again. No one's touched it in years. But the girl? She's still there. People see her, drivers, joggers, the occasional curious tourist, and always at the same window, just standing, watching. Some say her smile has gotten wider. Some say her hair is dripping now, wet, even when it hasn't rained. Some say her fingers twitch like she's counting something. 3, 2, 1. And when you look too long, too hard, you start to feel different. Like the air behind your neck is colder. Like something's breathing behind you even when you're alone. Like your reflection in the mirror is just a second too slow. They say the girl is waiting, but not for someone to save her. She's waiting for someone to trade places. And if you're not careful, if you look at her too long, you'll find yourself in the window, with her smile, and someone else's eyes, and you'll wonder how long it'll take before someone notices you're not the one looking out anymore. Big Cypress isn't like other parks. It breathes differently, sweats differently. It stretches out beneath a pale Florida sky like a wound trying to scab over, miles and miles of swampy silence where the trees whisper to each other in groans and creaks, and the earth gurgles like something alive just beneath the surface. The rangers smile when you come through the gate. They hand you maps and say, "Stick to the trails." They don't tell you what really waits out there. Not anymore. Because sometimes, only sometimes, and always just far enough off the beaten path to be accidental, people find it. A clearing, surrounded by towering cypress and shadows that don't behave like they should. There's a fire pit in the middle. 6 camping chairs in a neat ring around it, each a different color, each one open like it's waiting for someone. A tent stands off to the side, zipped shut, clean, not sagging or old. There's an empty cooler next to it, lid open like it was just used. It's always the same setup. No ash in the pit, no footprints, no wildlife noise, not even crickets, just a breathless stillness like the world is holding something in its mouth. And when you look away, even just for a second, it's gone. The clearing disappears. No chairs, no tent, just grass and gnarled roots and the feeling that you were somewhere you absolutely should not have been. The first known report was in 1994, but no one took it seriously. A couple of college kids out geocaching claimed they found a campsite for ghosts. The story got printed in the local paper under Weird Florida, and that was the end of it. Or so folks thought, but it kept happening. Every couple years, someone stumbles across it, usually hikers, hunters, campers, and always by accident. They never hear it before they see it. They just round a corner, part the moss, or step off the trail for a leak, and there it is, like it was waiting. In 2009, a group of 3 men, Mike, Deshaun, and Cody, headed out for a weekend hunt in Big Cypress. They were good old boys from Immokalee, grew up around the swamp, knew it like their own backyards. But even seasoned boots don't matter when the woods decide to turn on you. On the second morning around 5:45 a.m., they found the clearing. Mike saw it first and called out. The chairs, the fire pit, the zipped-up tent, they all joked it looked like someone had left in a hurry. Cody said the air felt too cold for August. They took pictures. Mike even poked around the cooler, empty but clean, like it had just been wiped. That's when Deshaun said he felt watched. Not paranoid, not scared, just aware. Like something was measuring him from the trees. They decided to bounce. When they looked back once, just once, it was gone. They huddled around Cody's phone to look at the photos. The clearing wasn't the same in the images. The photos showed rotting, sagging tents. The camping chairs were all stained with something dark, like dried blood. One was tipped over. The fire pit was filled with ash and bones. Small bones. One had what looked like a tooth on top, but worst of all was the tree in the center background. A tall bald cypress, half dead, its bark split wide, and carved into its trunk, plain as day, was a single word. Stay. They ran. Fast, branches whipping their faces, mud sucking at their boots. They didn't stop until they hit their truck parked off Loop Road. But Cody, he didn't make it. They said he stopped, just stopped walking, dropped his gun, dropped his pack, just stood there, staring into the trees like he was listening to something none of them could hear. Then he turned, slow as syrup, and walked back the way they came, toward the clearing. They screamed for him. Deshaun even tried to run after him, but Mike held him back. Something about the way Cody moved, the way his face looked, slack, almost peaceful, made Deshaun go cold all over. They called the Rangers. A full search team combed the woods for 3 days. No Cody, no sign of a campsite, not even a single boot print that didn't belong to the searchers. The official report lists it as voluntary disappearance. But if you talk to Deshawn now, 10 years later, he'll still swear to what he saw. He won't go near Big Cypress, won't even drive past it. He says Cody didn't vanish, he was taken, and every now and then, someone else finds that clearing. Just last year, a couple from Naples found it while hiking off trail. They took a selfie with the site in the background, but when they uploaded it later that night, the campsite looked different. There were figures in the chairs, blurred, pale. One of them, sitting far left, had a flannel shirt like the one Cody wore. His head was tilted, his mouth too wide. The couple deleted the photo, changed their phone numbers, moved to Arizona. Big Cypress doesn't make the news anymore. It's just there. A stretch of haunted earth, wide and quiet and old. And sometimes it shows you things. Sometimes it invites you in, but if you're smart, you'll look away. Because the clearing? It remembers. It keeps the ones who stay, and sooner or later, it might set a chair out for you. The Windsor House had been there long before most of St. Augustine's tourists came and went. Built in the late 1800s, it was one of those old southern mansions turned in, with weathered clapboards peeling in the humid Florida heat, and windows that caught the last glimmers of the sunset like tired eyes. For decades, the place survived on nostalgia, cheap rates, and a handful of curious travelers chasing the town's ghost stories. But the locals? They knew better than to stay in Room 12. Room 12 sat at the end of a long, creaky hallway, past the peeling wallpaper and faded portraits of strangers who had once smiled here. The door was chipped, the paint flaking like dried skin. It looked abandoned, like the house itself wanted you to stay away. Yet every year, without fail, someone checked in. Someone curious, someone desperate, someone who couldn't resist the dark pull of the whispers. It wasn't the kind of whisper you heard on the wind, or a soft voice behind the door. No. The whispers came inside your head, sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. At first, guests thought it was just their imagination, maybe the creaks of an old house or the hum of the nearby ocean waves. But soon, the voices got clearer. They spoke secrets, not of ghosts or spirits, but of you. The parts you'd buried so deep, you didn't even remember them yourself. Marlene was the first in recent memory, a woman in her late 30s running from grief after losing her brother to a drowning accident years before. She booked the room on a whim, hoping for quiet, for something that would numb the pain. But the moment midnight passed, the whispers came. The voice was cold, familiar. "You let me drown." It wasn't a scream or an accusation. It was a statement, a truth she'd hidden beneath layers of guilt and silence. She fled the inn the next morning, pale and shaking, vowing never to return. Then there was Carl, a quiet man who carried the weight of his father's death like a shadow. He stayed for 2 nights. The whispers in Room 12 weren't voices, they were memories, painful and raw. "You'll die just like your father," they told him. Calm, certain, unavoidable. Carl left the inn, never to answer his phone again, as if the room's dark prophecy had already claimed him. But the most haunting story was Henry's, a struggling writer who believed the whispers held secrets to unlock his creativity. He came, back again and again, even when the other guests warned him. The voices became louder, more insistent. They told him things no one else knew. Dark things. The kind of things that eat at your soul. One night, Henry hanged himself from the ceiling fan in Room 12. The autopsy found no signs of struggle, but the police discovered his lips were sewn shut with thin wire. His final note, scrawled in trembling handwriting, said only, "It told me the truth. Elias, the innkeeper, was a man of few words but many secrets. He told visitors that some truths were too heavy for the living, that the room was a place where the past reached out and never let go." Most guests either ran screaming from the Windsor House after hearing the whispers or came back, addicted, like moths drawn to a deadly flame. The room's hunger was endless. What exactly were the whispers? Some said the room was cursed by a long-dead spiritualist who dabbled in dark magic. Others whispered of a hidden mirror in room 12 that trapped the souls of those who stared too long. No one really knew. All anyone could say was that the whispers weren't lies. They were memories, regrets, confessions, truths so raw they cut through the mind like shards of glass. Locals claim that if you walk by the Windsor House on a quiet night, you can sometimes hear faint whispers carried on the wind, and if you listen closely, you might just hear your own secrets being told back to you, because the whispering room doesn't just reveal the past, it demands you face it, and once it's done, you're never the same again. The Everglades don't give up their secrets easily. They hide behind mists that curl like serpents over stagnant water, behind cypress knees that jut out of the muck like broken bones. The swamp smells of rot and rain and something else, something ancient and waiting. For those who live near it, the Everglades are less a place than a living thing. It watches, listens, and waits. Louis Hargrove had lived in Miami most of his life, but spent more time in the swamp than in the city. He was a tracker for the Florida Game Commission, a man with a ranger's steady step and a hunter's patient eyes. At 37, with hands weathered from sun and mud, he knew the Everglades like the back of his scarred palm. But the swamp was changing. The summer of 2004 was hotter and wetter than most. The mosquitoes swarmed in endless waves, thick as smoke. The air was heavy, suffocating, and the buzzing never stopped. But it wasn't just the insects that made Louis's skin crawl. It started one late July evening. Louis had been patrolling the western edge of Big Cypress Preserve, a section where the sawgrass grew tall and water snakes slithered silent beneath the surface. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows that melted into the trees. He had just pulled over to stretch his legs, the engine humming low in the background. Lighting a cigarette, he took in the heavy stillness, the way the swamp seemed to hold its breath. Then he heard it, a soft, plaintive crying. At first he thought it was a bird, maybe a heron or an egret, calling in the dusk, but the sound grew clearer, almost human. A child's voice, calling his name. Louis! Louis! He snuffed out the cigarette, fingers stiff. He scanned the tree line with his flashlight, but saw nothing but waving branches and dark shapes. His radio crackled in the truck cab. No one else reported anything. The crying stopped. He shook his head. "Get a grip, Hargrove." He was about to get back in the truck when the crying returned, louder, desperate. "Help me!" The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Louis stepped into the swamp, boots sinking in the muddy water. The cry echoed through the cypress knees, a sound so chilling it clawed at his chest. The air around him grew thick, humid and cold at the same time, like the swamp was breathing down his neck. Then the voice changed. It was no longer a child, but a woman. A whisper, urgent and low. "Come closer." He gripped his rifle tighter, heart pounding like a drum in his ears. There was no way he was about to get sucked into some ghost story. But the voice, it felt real, too real. The beam from his flashlight flickered and died. Darkness closed in. From the shadows, something moved, tall, hairless. Its eyes, glowing red, burned like embers in the night. Louis froze. The creature stepped into the light, but it wasn't a man, and it wasn't a beast. It was something twisted, a skinwalker wearing the shape of a man like a puppet. Its grin was wide and sharp, full of teeth that glinted like knives. Then it vanished into the trees. Louis sprinted back, to his truck, engine roaring. The dash cam mounted on the windshield had captured it all. Tall figure crouching in the trees, red eyes staring through the glass. But the footage cut off abruptly. When Louis stepped out to check the truck, he found deep claw marks carved into the paint, 3 long grooves that tore through metal like paper. That was the first sign. The days that followed were worse. Lewis tried to shake off the experience, but the swamp kept calling. The cries returned, echoing in his dreams. Whispers filled the humid air, voices promising to reveal secrets no man should know. One morning, Lewis's partner, a younger man named Derek, vanished without a trace. The only clue was a trail of muddy footprints leading to the water, then nothing. The search party found Derek's truck abandoned on the side of the road, keys in the ignition and a broken radio, but no Derek. Lewis was haunted by guilt and fear. What had caught Derek? What had called him into the swamp? And the Skinwalker was still out there. They say the Skinwalker is ancient, older than the swamp itself. A creature from Native American legend, a shapeshifter who steals the skin of its victims to wear as a disguise. It uses their voices to lure the living into its grasp. It knows the land better than any man, moving silently through the sawgrass and mangroves. Hunters swear they've heard it mimic the screams of children lost to the marsh. They've seen it disappear in plain sight, shifting shapes like smoke. No, one knows what it wants, only that it's patient. It waits for the right moment to strike. Some say it's a punishment, a curse on those who disrespect the land. Others believe it's a predator, feeding on the fear and flesh of the living. Lewis knew it was something worse. On a moonless night, Lewis decided to face the creature. He packed his gear, rifle, knife, night vision goggles, and his old camera, and headed into the swamp alone. The silence was thick, broken only by the splash of his boots and the distant calls of night creatures. Hours passed. Then he heard it, a child's voice, soft and pleading. "Lewis, come play with me." He followed the voice deeper into the swamp, heart pounding. Suddenly the ground gave way beneath him. He plunged into the murky water, cold and suffocating. He surfaced, gasping for air, only to find himself face to face with the Skinwalker. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, its grin stretching impossibly wide. Lewis raised his rifle, but the creature was too fast. It lunged, claws outstretched. When rescuers found Lewis 2 days later, he was face down in a shallow pool, lungs filled with mud. No wounds, no scratches, but his skin, peeled clean off, like a costume left behind. The Everglades had claimed another. There's a long stretch of highway running along Florida's east coast called Route A1A. It hugs the Atlantic Ocean. The sand beach is just a stone's throw from the pavement, the salty air thick with the scent of seaweed and damp driftwood. It's a beautiful drive in the daytime, palm trees waving, the sun setting like a giant ember behind the horizon. But at night, especially on rainy, storm-heavy evenings, that beauty turns sour. They call it the vanishing hitchhiker. The stories, been whispered along gas stations, diner counters, and truck stops from Palm Beach to Daytona Beach for decades. You see, along Route A1A, when the rain falls hard and the wind howls, some drivers spot a girl standing on the shoulder. She's young, maybe 16 or 17. Her dress is torn, soaked through with rain. It looks like a prom dress, faded white with streaks of mud and grass stains. Her black hair is tangled and wet, clinging to her pale face. And she's always crying. Her eyes are red-rimmed and wide, full of sorrow and something else. A silent plea. You slow down, pull over, and ask if she needs a ride. She'll say yes, of course. Her voice is soft and trembling. She tells you her date left her, stranded, alone, forgotten in the storm. You nod and open the passenger door, feeling sorry for the poor girl. You get back on the highway, the windshield, wipers thrashing to keep the rain clear. But then something strange happens. Before you reach the next town, she's gone. One moment, she's there, curled in the seat, clutching her damp dress to her chest, sobbing softly. The next, the seat's empty, no door opened, no footsteps heard. Just silence. You glance in the rearview mirror, your breath catching. Your mirrors start to fog up, even though your defroster is blasting full. The radio crackles to life. Static, bleeding through the speakers, forming words that don't make sense. Your hands tremble on the wheel. Some drivers lose control, crash. Others find themselves miles off course. Time warps, minutes stretch into hours. One man, named Tom Baker, arrived home 2 hours late, soaked and shaking. He said he could still hear her sobbing in the back seat. He burned the car the next day. Tom's story was the first I heard when I moved down to Florida in the summer of 2006. I was 22, fresh out of college, working as a night shift gas station clerk on a lonely stretch of A1A near Vero Beach. Rain hammered the asphalt every night like a relentless drumbeat. The highway felt different in those hours, like a living thing watching you through the storm. Tom came in one morning, pale and twitchy, ordering black coffee and staring out the window like he'd seen a ghost. "Did you hear about the girl?" he asked, voice low. I shrugged. "Which girl?" "The one that shows up on the road during the rain. Always crying, always in that damn prom dress." I laughed nervously. "Sounds like a ghost story." He shook his head. "It's real, man. I gave her a ride once. She vanished right before I hit the next town. I swear my mirrors fogged up and the radio went crazy. I heard her sobbing the whole drive home." "And the car?" He spat on the ground. "Burned it the next day. Couldn't take the memories." I didn't believe him. Not at first, but then I saw her. It was late September, hurricane season, still lingering, heavy rains drumming against the roof of the gas station. I was finishing my shift, wiping down the counter, when headlights flashed outside. A car slowed near the pump. I watched as the driver pulled over on the shoulder, rain plastering the windshield with water. That's when I saw her, a teenage girl, standing just off the road. Her dress was torn and muddy, hair slicked to her face. She looked soaked to the bone and crying softly. I thought about the stories, the vanishing hitchhiker. She raised a hand, waving for help. Something inside me stirred. A mix of fear and a strange sadness. I stepped outside. "Are you okay?" I called, voice shaky. She looked up at me. Her eyes were huge and wet. "My date left me," she whispered. I hesitated. "Do you want a ride?" I asked. She nodded, stepping closer. I was about to help her into the passenger seat when the wind whipped up, howling through the palm fronds. The sky cracked open with thunder. She suddenly vanished, right there. No footsteps, no splash in the puddles. Just gone. I stood frozen, heart hammering. After that night, I started hearing more. Other drivers telling similar stories. One woman swore she saw the girl dissolve into mist as she reached out to touch her hand. Another man lost an hour of time after giving her a ride. He said he woke up on the highway with no memory of how he got there. The stories piled up, each one darker and stranger than the last. The vanishing hitchhiker wasn't just a ghost story. It was a curse. I began digging into the past. There was a prom dance at a small high school near Fort Pierce in 1983. A girl named Lily Marston. She was 16, popular, bright. But that night, her date never showed. Rumor was, he stood her up, left her waiting in the rain. Lily ran out into the storm, desperate and alone. She disappeared. Her body was never found. The school canceled prom after that. Locals said Lily's spirit haunted the highway, searching for the boyfriend who left her to die. The more I learned, the heavier the feeling grew. Like the highway itself mourned her, and maybe something else, something darker, was using her grief to trap the living. One rainy night, I decided to drive the stretch where Lily was last seen. The rain lashed my windshield, headlights cutting through the mist. I was alone, except for the radio, which hummed quietly. Halfway down the road, I saw her, standing just beyond the guardrail, torn, dress-soaked hair, tears glistening on her face. "Please," she whispered. I pulled over, heart thundering. The air grew cold. I unlocked the door. She climbed in. Her hand brushed mine, cold as ice. The radio flared, static screaming through the speakers. The mirrors fogged over. Her sobs filled the car. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Before I could turn to her, she was gone. The seat empty, the air thick and heavy. I drove on, shaking. Afterward, the radio wouldn't stop, static and whispers. My mirrors stayed fogged. I felt her presence every time I looked back. The vanishing hitchhiker wasn't just a ghost, she was a warning. A sadness that could swallow you whole. Never gave her another ride. But some drivers still do. Some never come back. Others return changed. The vanishing hitchhiker waits on rainy nights along Route A1A, her dress torn, her tears endless, and the sorrow that follows. Well, that's the real curse. The house stood at the end of a quiet street, barely more than a faded blue speck on the map of Pensacola's oldest neighborhoods. Its paint was cracked and peeling. The front porch sagged under the weight of time, and the windows, those grimy, half-curtained eyes, stared out like something waiting, watching. The kind of place the town kids whispered about but never dared approach after dark. For Mark and Susan Johnson and their 2 daughters, Emily and Sarah, it was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the cramped apartment, downtown, and settle in a place of their own. The house had been cheap, too cheap, maybe, but that never mattered to Mark, who saw opportunity beneath the rot and dust. The first weeks were uneventful, save for the way the house felt cold in the middle of summer, like it carried a chill in its bones. Susan would sometimes pause mid-step, the hair on her arms rising as if caught in a sudden breeze, but every time she told Mark, he just laughed and joked it off until the night she saw the blood. It started in the bathroom. Susan had woken early one morning to find the tile walls, slick with dark, glistening stains. She reached out to touch them and flinched as the metallic scent hit her nose. Thick, coppery, unmistakably human blood. She called Mark immediately. "We need to call someone," she said, voice shaking. Mark frowned, rolling up his sleeve to inspect. But there was no sign of injury on anyone in the family. No cuts, no scrapes. Susan's stomach churned. They hired a specialist to test the stains. The results came back the same as they feared: human blood. But there were no bodies, no crime scene, just blood, seeping and pooling inside their home. After that, the bleeding spread. The kitchen walls were next, then the ceiling above the living room. Some nights, Susan swore the walls pulsed like a heartbeat, soft and steady beneath the paint. The house breathed, alive and sick. Sarah, the youngest, began to change. She stopped playing outside and spent hours in her room, speaking in whispers to someone unseen. Sometimes Susan found her drawing circles on the walls, strange teeth-shaped patterns that seemed to writhe when you stared too long. One night, Susan awoke to find Sarah kneeling in the hall, eyes wide and blackened, chanting words Susan couldn't understand. Mark refused to believe anything supernatural. "We'll fix this," he said, hammer in hand. But the house fought back. Renovations stalled as tools disappeared or broke. Paint peeled faster than they could apply it. And the whispers started, not ghostly moans or the creaking of old wood, but voices, urgent, sharp, calling to each family member by name, revealing secrets best left buried. Susan heard her dead brother's voice accusing. "You let me drown." Mark heard the warning. "You'll die just like your father." Emily didn't speak for days, her eyes darting to corners where no one stood. In March, it all came to a head. One stormy night, the house groaned and shook as if breathing its last. Suddenly, thick red liquid seeped from the floorboards, pooling in the hallway and spilling onto the porch. Mark tried to stop it, throwing furniture in its path, but the blood kept flowing like a curse. Neighbors gathered, eyes wide with fear. The Johnson family fled that night, leaving everything behind. The house sat empty, but the town never forgot. Lights flicker behind, boarded windows. At night, when the moon is low, neighbors swear red liquid drips beneath the front door, staining the sidewalk in glistening pools. Some teenagers dared to enter once. One returned screaming, clothes soaked in blood, babbling about voices trapped in the walls. Another vanished without a trace. The city tried to forget. They paved over the street, painted the porch, sealed the windows. But the blood always came back. The house bled, and it still waits for its next family.